welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. Today we're going to talk about an issue that I've got. What reel to get next? Tough decision. I own, one, two, three, four Baitcasters and a few spinning reels. Now, the quandary when you choose your next reel, not your first reel. Your first reel was more than likely a spinning reel. Let's look down here. We're going to talk about both of these. And one is the spinning reel, one is the Baitcaster. So we're going to talk about both of these. And which one, what's good for what. So, let's go with the easy one, the spinning reel. Spinning reel is what we all learned on, more than likely that or a spin caster, which is the single button one. So, the spinning reel is the easiest to operate. I mean, you just flip what we call the bail. This thing right here, you just flip it, release your thumb off of it, and cast. Pretty simple. And that's what you do. Your drag is up front. It's bulky. And it's heavier. But it's easier to operate. The good thing about it is that you can take something as small as a little jig, put it on there and cast it. So that's the advantage of this very lightweight setup when it comes to your jigs and your baits. This is your better one to go with. So you got to think, what am I fishing for? And around here in Klamath Falls, Oregon, a lot is panfish, perch, and trout. When you're dealing with panfish, perch, and trout, you're typically dealing with smaller setups, very light. So spinning reels work really, really well for them. I'm a bass fisherman. There you go. And I enjoy catching bass because there's so many different ways you can catch them, and they can be rather finicky. So, I have to ask myself, do I need another trout setup or another bass setup? I will tell you one thing about bait casting. Bait casting requires about a quarter ounce, typically about a quarter ounce weight on it on your lure, your jig, your worm, whatever it is, in order to reliably cast. Anything less than a quarter ounce, I'm going to be using my spinning reel. That's why I carry both out in my boat, in my kayak. There's one thing about bait casters. Well, there's several things. One, it requires practice to do well. Once you practice and you understand how to use a bait caster, it's a piece of cake. They're very, very light. I fish for about 6 to 8 hours a day when I go fishing. And that's a lot of repetitive wrist motion. So my rods have to be light and my reels have to be light in order for me to not come home and the next day my wrists hurt. And they will hurt. So you really need to have something that is better for your wrist. And a lightweight reel and a lightweight rod is really the key for comfort the next following day. And also tiring yourself for that day. So I fish a long day into the evenings. And so I enjoy having a very lightweight reel. Also, it's more accurate. With a spinning reel, that's my cat. With the spinning reel, you tend to overshoot, and it's tough to hit the mark. It's tough to hit the mark exactly. So, with a Baitcaster, I'm much more accurate. I can hit a 4-inch circle with a Baitcaster. So Baitcasters. The bait casting reel, very, very light. Easy once you get the hang of it. Because what a Baitcaster does is that the spool spins. On a spinning reel, strangely enough, it's called a spinning reel, the spool does not spin, it stays stationary. And the line just falls off of it. Where this, the spool turns and it releases the line through its rotation. So this really should be called the spinning reel. And maybe that should be called the Baitcaster. I don't know. But their names don't match up to what their spools do. But because this spool spins, it has a problem with backlashing. And that's where practice. And it has a braking system on it. So with the Kastking on this one, this is called the Spartacus Plus. This has a dual braking system on it. So there we go. That's what we call a centrifugal braking system. I always just leave it on 3 and I'm happy with it. But notice it goes from less to more. And you can, what this does, it throws out pins as it spins in order to, it's like a drum brake on a car. And it will go ahead and slow down the rotation of the spool. It also has magnetic brakes. There's 5 buttons on here. So with the 5 buttons, you have an adjustment on the outside which pushes the buttons closer and pulls them farther away from this spool in order to cause braking to happen. Now, the reason for that is that as this spins, it spins really fast when you start to cast it. What ends up happening is that as your weight on your line reaches its apex, it'll start to slow down. Your spool will continue to spin fast. And so past the apex, as your weight descends upon the water, it's going to slower until finally it stops. That's what the brakes are for. It's to adjust for the weight on your line, your bait, as it hits the apex and starts to slow down and hits the water. Takes a little bit of practice, but you can run your thumb right here, just ride it, and you stop it. Keep an eye on your bait and stop it with your thumb right before it hits the water. And with a little bit of practice and proper settings, you'll hardly ever backlash. And you really don't want to backlash. It's a pain in the rear. So with a little bit of practice and a good reel like the Spartacus Plus, this is a really good beginner reel for all those that want to try bait casting. I would just crank it to 7 on the centrifugal and crank it to 10 here and just get used to using it. And then as you get used to using it, using your thumb, start to back off on your braking until you get really good long distances in casting. And that's really the advantage of a dual braking system Baitcaster. So, can a Baitcaster actually launch something less than a 1/4 ounce? The answer is yes. If you get the proper Baitcaster called a BFS. And the BFS reel is very shallow, doesn't hold a lot of line. Great for flipping, but because it is less material on the spool, it's extremely light. And that allows the baitcaster to toss or to cast something very, very light. And that's another option. So baitcasters can come in lots of different varieties, as you see online. I would recommend a Kastking, not just because I'm sponsored by them, because I am sponsored by them because I like them. I would not be sponsored by somebody I did not believe in. And they're a great company when it comes to customer service. So a baitcaster is a very simple, more accurate, and lighter reel to own. For trout, pan fishing, perch fishing, things like that, a spinning reel, which is an oxymoron because it doesn't spin. Well, the bail does, but that's it. I mean, the bail spins, but the spool does not. The spool spins, the spool does not spin. But this is great for lighter setups. So this is my lightweight. This is my heavyweight. Although this can handle, I mean, I've got, I think this is 8-pound line on it right now. And I'm going to restring it. And with 8-pound line, I can catch a 20-pound fish. So don't think that the poundage of a line dictates the weight of the fish, because it doesn't. It's the way you play the fish. Let's look up at me. Now, fly fishermen, and I've been friends with avid fly fishermen, and they have a very interesting setup. The reason they flip their line is because there's no weight on the end. They're trying to whip it out there. Flies are extremely light. They weigh hardly nothing. And so they're using the whipping action in order to cast it out there. But they use at the end of their floating line something called a tippet. This tippet is basically like a fluorocarbon line. Really, really small, like 2 pounds. And they catch steelhead that are 15 pounds on it. 20-pound steelhead on a 2-pound tippet. I've seen fly fishermen catch tarpon. You know, that's a 6-7 foot fish on very light tippets. Fishing line does not dictate how big a fish that you can catch. It does not. That's skill. So the nice thing is about the lighter lines is that it requires a little bit more skill and time to bring the fish in. You just can't muscle them in or else you'll snap your line. You got to let them run, wear them out, steer them in. The bigger the fish, the lighter the line, the longer the play. It's just the way it is. But it's more fun. Catch a large fish on a light setup, even a lighter rod, and you will probably enjoy fishing even more. And that is a lot of fun. It just is a lot more fun. So I don't use 50-pound, 40-pound, 30-pound test. I just don't on any of my rods. In fact, 20-pound is the highest test that I actually use. And I'm about to convert all my lines over to the Covert. Do I have that box somewhere over here? Yeah, here it is. I've been testing out the Covert Fluorocarbon line by Kastking. It's a brand new line by them. And fluorocarbon line does not stretch like monofilament line does. And it's abrasion resistant. It has the same refraction as water. So the line itself is fairly invisible. It's like, you just can't see, the fish can't see it. And line does make a big difference. If I went braid all the way down to the lure, yes, I'll catch fish, but not as many. If I put a leader on it, I'll catch more. If I use something clear, like the fluorocarbon, I'll catch more. So I'll put a 15-pound test on fluorocarbon onto my Baitcasters and 8-pound or 6-pound on my spinning gear. And fish are not distracted by that string attached to that bait that they think is food. Believe it or not, it makes a difference. I did a video just the other day on bass instinct and habits. You should watch that. It's only 5 minutes long. But being bass instinct and habits, you'll understand that they learn through getting caught and released, and we catch and release a lot, that a string attached to something that's delicious looking is bad news. They learn that. So we need to have something that's fairly invisible. And the beautiful thing about bass fishing, if you've never done it, you'll get frustrated at the start because you won't catch one for a while. But once you start catching them, you'll love the fact that you can catch them any way you want. Top water, suspended, bottom, live bait, plastic baits, jerk baits, hard baits. Doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. Because they learn a certain pattern on which they are caught, and then you have to adapt to that by removing that out of your arsenal and going with something different. The most accurate way to cast is with a baitcaster. For trout, for perch, for sunfish, panfish, these things, use a spinning rod. Very lightweight. You can see what's on it. My friend was using this for ice fishing the other day. Yeah, it's a really long ice fishing rod. I mean, a lot of times ice fishing rods are really tiny. Really tiny. So you can sit right on top of the hole. So, what will I be buying next? You know, there is one reel that I really, really like. Well, I like all of them. But Kastking makes one called a Crixus Armor X. It's lightweight, but it's got an aluminum housing, skeleton inside of it, instead of carbon fiber or graphite. So it's tough as nails. So maybe that one. I don't know. Maybe a BFS if they get it in stock. So I wanted to thank you guys for watching this. I hope I helped you a little bit. So if you want simplicity for the beginner, buy a spinning setup. If you want accuracy and lightweight, then buy a Baitcaster. But it requires practice, practice, practice. And I would tell you to get something like the Spartacus with dual braking systems. I would tell you to get that in order to reduce your frustration of backlashing and bird's nests on it, and just crank it up until you get used to casting, and then just start backing it down a little bit at a time. In I don't know, 3 days of fishing, you'll be a pro in no time with a Baitcaster. If you use a Spartacus Plus with dual braking, and use 15 to 20 pound test line on it. Don't use really small, lightweight line on it. Just don't do that with a Baitcaster. Preferably use fluorocarbon, because if you're a beginning fisherman, you really don't want to deal with leaders and stuff like that. So go with a pure fluorocarbon. Use the Covert. Go 15 or 20 pound test. Use that, and as a beginner Baitcaster, you'll find that your fishing will become more productive and your fishing accuracy of casting so much better. So I hope this helps a little bit. I will do a review on the reel I get, of course. If it's the Crixus Armor X, great. If it's a Zephyr, if it's in stock, that's a BFS reel, great. So take care, have fun, keep your lines tight.